Hi, Sasha. How's it going?
It's going well. How are things with you?
Good, good. I the Cass review, the Cass report came out, and God, 4 years. Hilary Cass, Dr. Hilary Cass. For anybody who doesn't know, anybody in gender world will know. 4 years. Dr. Hilary Cass and her team have been working really hard. I saw an interview with her where she said, "I thought it was just going to be a few afternoons a week for about 6 months."
4 years later.
4 years later, completely consumed, 24 hours a day, and a team have worked on, gender treatment. It's the largest and it's the most comprehensive and it's the most detailed report of its kind, which is gender treatment for children. And it's an independent report. It's got a stack of research with it. It is really, really going to be really, really useful for anybody who is trying to put forward that what is actually going on with gender treatment for children these days. Based in the UK, however, it's 9,000 children that they're discussing. So this is really comprehensive. And ultimately, what Dr. Hilary Cass comes out with is effectively that there is no evidence to support radical treatments. There is no evidence. The evidence base is really low. And as far as I'm concerned, now the research is in. Like when we first started GenSpect in 2021, we were very ready to kind of conceive the idea of there's lots of research. Maybe we're wrong. We don't know. We were very kind of humble in the idea of there could be all sorts we don't know about. Now that we've all immersed ourselves for years, you and me and so many of us, I think we can say with the Cass report, we've enough research now. There comes to time, it's a great line in therapy, which is you can build evidence forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've built the evidence. Cass has done the evidence. The research is in. We don't we could have a whole stack of other pieces of research. We could spend thousands and thousands of euros on research, and all we'll ever get is with what Cass has, which is we don't have evidence to support it. So there's Bertrand Russell, the philosopher from way back in the day, he must be 100 years ago, but he used to say, how can you prove that there isn't a chocolate teapot circling the earth? So arguably with gender treatment, there's something similar going on, because we can't quite prove whether gender treatment is going to be good or bad, if you follow me. It's debatable, it's very much on the person. But for people who are trying to carry out very radical, irreversible treatments on children, it's the burden of proof is on them to prove that this extraordinary treatment has enough evidence to support it. The burden of evidence should never have been on us.
Yeah.
And so Hilary Cass, by coming out with all of that work, and she ultimately says there's no evidence to support it, and that's all she can say. Because how can you prove that it's the burden of proof was on the wrong people, really?
Totally.
And so, yeah. And I think we need to pivot away from trying to prove anything to do with gender treatment and all that, and now just say least invasive first, back to kind of first principles, cautious approach, kind of, I think that's where our emphasis should be now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this whole thing has really shown that the advocacy groups and the activists did a very good job of putting kind of normal standards of operating on the back foot. It's very strange. And actually, Dr. Cass in her report highlights the differences between, the kind of old treatments for childhood gender dysphoria versus the affirmative model, which she recognizes was kind of born in the United States and kind of proliferated around the world, which is this idea that a child knows who they are and their declarations about gender need to be taken essentially at face value, and that the child should lead the way. Like you said, that the circling of a giant chocolate teapot, the burden of proof should always have been on the Aaron Safts and the affirmative model people.
Yes.
Because it's like kind of a non-falsifiable woo-woo idea. And yet for some reason, the last decade or so, we
bought into this idea.
Yeah, we've been on the back foot trying to say, and we've been accused of, and Hilary Cass also in the report points out that the nature of this debate and the fear of being called transphobic and all of these kind of highly charged political statements has contributed to the difficulty in this area. And, I have not read the full report. It's something like 400 pages, but I've read several
380.
kind of reviews of the report from trusted resources like Segum. I read something by Kathleen Stock. There's a New York Times piece. So there's lots of pieces coming out. And I'm looking forward to digging into the report. But it seems like she highlights a couple of key things that are, beyond the obvious, which is that the obvious being, if there's no evidence that this could be helpful and there's some evidence of risks, this is not the right treatment. That's kind of the gist of it. She also goes on to highlight that young adults are also quite vulnerable. And 18s to 25s, that older adolescent period, is a vulnerable stage. She points out that social transition is not a neutral intervention and suggests extreme caution for families making the decision around social transition. She talks about the kind of using threats of suicide is totally unfounded, because she points out that other mental health comorbidities can explain any elevated risks in trans identified youth, not because of the gender itself. So she kind of, it feels good because we have been saying these things for so long. And we've been accused by some of being these kind of transphobic conversion therapists. So it just feels really nice to be vindicated. And 4 years of research and 8 systematic reviews that she used to look at this data. And, I haven't dug into this yet, but very interestingly, I think WPATH has responded to the Cass report and accused her of being cis heteronormative or something along those lines. No surprise to us. But it does feel like such a monumentous report, and I'm hoping that the U.S. begins to recognize it is an outlier. By using the affirmative care model here in the U.S., we are becoming an outlier, like leeches or something. Like, it's so crazy what we're doing. So I hope that this report has an impact here.
And just one or two more things about the Cass report. That point you raised about, that there isn't an elevated risk of suicide. The reason why these extraordinary interventions were brought in was on the basis of this is an emergency, this is life-saving. And they never would have got past the step A had they not done this heightened language. We've long established, it's an elevated risk for everybody with mental health issues, but it's no more elevated than other people with mental health issues.
Yeah.
And by using that line, all the doors got open, all the interventions opened, everything opened on this. And now we know that line is not true. We have literally, God bless Michael Biggs and his FOI, Freedom of Information requests to GIDS at the Tavistock to find out that over a period of 10 years, between 2010 and 2020, 15,000 children were either being treated or they were on the waiting list, and 4 of those died by suicide, 2 of whom were on the waiting list, 2 of whom were being treated. And that's not an elevated risk. It's a tragedy, but it's not an elevated risk. And we have to deal with the facts when we're dealing with suicide. And so now we know that that is the case. And we know that these are experimental interventions that can lead to extreme devastation if the person regrets it.
Yeah.
We arguably have a very strong case to say this is not where, and certainly it's the position of GenSpec now, these interventions should not be carried out in hospitals. They should be not funded by the state purse. These are not life-saving. These are not necessary. These are arguably more along the lines of cosmetic surgery, extreme body modification clinics. This is not where the public funding should be going. And I think Cass has clarified that. So we've moved out of the research stage where we were thinking, is this, could this be? And now we know, no, that's not true. Now we have to move into a more policies around the realistic situation. One last thing about the Hilary Cass is that we now know that we are dealing with experimental treatments that is not life-saving, and we can kind of free ourselves up to kind of act upon that. We've kind of got the research now to back mine and your position. So we're in a much stronger position now, thankfully, than ever before.
Yeah. And I mean, one last thing. She recommends psychological support, generalized psychological support. So she's actually
Standard.
recommending,
I loved it.
to move it out of gender and into just a more generalized, standard psychological approach to things like distress, suicidality, etc. So,
And
absolutely.
the clinics do not need to have the word gender in their name.
Correct.
I completely agree. You know, we could one day do maybe when we've read it and fully digested it, not the quick hot takes that everybody are doing. Me and you could do an analysis of just the depths of it. Maybe we might even get Dr. Hilary Cass to join us.
I'd love that.
Yeah.